Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. My name is Samantha, and I'm in client services here at the Retirement Group, and I moderate these weekly webinars. You are going to see me throw some very useful links into the chat throughout the presentation. One will guide you to our LinkedIn, where you can view upcoming webinar updates. And the second will be a link to the Education Center, where you can view a full online library of all of our past recordings. And the third will be a link to book an appointment with an advisor after this webinar. So please keep an eye on that chat for those links. Today, we're going to be speaking with Carlos Hernandez, and he's going to be speaking to KP employees about how you can optimize your pension. Carlos will explain valuable strategies to assess your pension benefits, your pension payouts, and ensure long-time financial stability. Before I bring Carlos on, I'd just like to remind you that although we work very closely with both active and retired members of the KP family, we are not endorsed nor affiliated whatsoever with KP. The Retirement Group is a completely independent group of financial advisors, so please keep that in mind. And after Carlos's presentation, I will be coming back on with him to answer any of the questions you may have entered into the Q&A box throughout his presentation. Please ask away. It's 100% anonymous. We love getting your questions and answering as many as we can, time permitted. And now that I've gotten all that boring stuff out of the way, I'd like to introduce you to our speaker today, Carlos Hernandez. Hi, Carlos.
Hey, Sam. Thank you for getting us started there, and welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us here today. As Sam had mentioned, the Retirement Group is an independent financial advisor firm. We are not a part of Kaiser Permanente, but unlike most financial planning firms out there, we have been working with KP employees for many, many years now, which puts us in a unique position to be able to provide more specialized, tailored advice given your current benefits and situation at the company. Which helps us be able to give you more prudent advice and help you build a comprehensive retirement plan, which is something that we actually provide as a complimentary basis. Towards the end of today's presentation, we'll make sure to touch base on how you can set that up. And for those that are joining us for the first time, my name is Carlos Hernandez. I'm one of the client service associates here, as well part of our KP Focus team at the Retirement Group. And like Sam had mentioned, for today's agenda, we're going to be talking about the pension plan. Now, before we get into the meat of things, we're going to be going over a few things to make sure you guys get a full understanding. First off, we're going to start off with some key terms that you need to know. As well, I picked out 3 different pension examples that we'll be covering today. These are going to be some of the more common pension groups within Kaiser. But even if you don't fall within these pension plans, feel free to reach back out to the Retirement Group so we could schedule a one-on-one call to make sure you get a full understanding of what your benefits are given where you're employed at KP. As most of you are aware on the call, that Kaiser is made up of many different unions and units that make up the entire organization of Kaiser Permanente. So depending on where in the country you're employed in, what your position in, what department you belong in, all those things will mean that your pension will have subtle differences and nuances. And as well, we'll be going over those pension calculations, how they're calculated, what considerations to take, and as well as everyone's favorite conversation, the payment options. Now, for key terms, the first term that you should really know is vesting, which is another word that they use for eligibility. At Kaiser, in order to be vested or eligible for a pension, you need to be employed with them for a minimum of 5 years. So that would mean their vesting requirement is a 5-year vesting requirement. Once you've hit that 5-year vesting period, you would be entitled to some sort of pension amount, but depending on when you leave Kaiser would determine on when you'd be able to take that pension. And then we have the final average monthly compensation, which is going to be the salary component of the pension formula. So the way that the pension works is that it's calculated based on giving you a percentage of your pay based on how long you've worked at the company. The final average monthly compensation is going to be the salary component specifically tied to the KFH plan, which is the Kaiser Foundation Hospital Plan. And then we have credited service, which credited service is going to be another term that they use for active time of employment at KP. So most of the unions or groups at Kaiser actually use an hourly basis to calculate credited service. So you don't necessarily have to work one full calendar year. A good example of this is going to be the CNA pension plan, which is the California Nurses Association. Their credited service, 1 year credited service equals 2,000 hours worked. We're going to be going over how some of these companies use this number slightly different, depending on what group you're employed in. And then we have pension offsets, which is going to be another term used for pension reductions. The most common one that we're going to be covering today, are age penalties. We're going to be going over how age penalties work a little bit different depending on what part of Kaiser you're employed in. But for the most part, this is going to be a reduction to your pension if you were to do early retirement. At KP, normal retirement age is going to be 65, but they do allow you to use what is called an early retirement option, which is retiring prior to age 65, but that does come with a pension reduction or pension offset, depending on the age that you chose to commence your benefit. Now, the first pension we're going to be covering is the KFH plan, which is the Kaiser Foundation Hospital Plan. You'll notice that it's made up of these three different components. You have your final average monthly compensation. So what they're going to look at is over the last 10 years of your career, which years were the highest 5 consecutive years. They'll average out a monthly compensation for that number to use as your salary component. Then you see this 1.5 credited service factor number multiplied by your years of service. You can think of that number as for every year you worked at KP, they'll essentially give you 1.5% of what you used to get in a paycheck. So let's say you worked there for 30 years, you multiply 30 times 1.5%, which would essentially give you 45% of what you used to get in a paycheck. And from that amount, you would subtract out any pension offsets if they apply to get your overall monthly payment. So pension offsets for the Kaiser Foundation Hospital, it's going to be a 3% reduction per year under the age of 65, and then 5% reduction under the age of 60. So depending on when you're planning to do the early retirement, would effectively give you the penalty or pension offset your amount would receive. And then for TPMG employees, which stands for the Permanent and Medical Group, that one actually has two different versions of the plan. The one that we're going to be covering today is going to be for salaried employees, but there is also the physician side of the plan, which is slightly different. If you fall into that group, feel free to schedule some time between myself or anybody from my team that can help you in understanding your plan. But if you notice, it's slightly similar, but instead of using the final average monthly compensation, what they're going to do now is use your highest average compensation, which works similar. What they're going to do is look over the last 10 years of your career and pick out the highest 5 years of compensation. They'll average out a monthly benefit to that amount, and that is what they'll use as your salary component. And again, they're going to use the same 1.5% credited service factor number times your years of service would ultimately give you your monthly amount. Then you would subtract that by any pension offsets if they apply. Pension offsets for TPMG employees are going to be the same. So it's going to be a 3% reduction per year under the age of 65 and a 5% reduction per year under the age of 60. Now, one thing to know about TPMG pension plan is that they actually allow for what is called a deferred retirement credit. What that means is if you plan to continue working past age 65, you're actually losing up on some benefits because the normal retirement age at Kaiser is age 65. So all numbers are calculated to that age. If you say that you're going to work to age 66 or 67, you're actually losing out on 1 to 2 years of pension benefits, which Kaiser kindly tries to help you recoup that by giving you this deferred retirement credit, which works similar to Social Security. Social Security is another asset or income asset that you get more for waiting longer. This one is going to work very, very similar to that. It's usually a give or take of which one you decide to defer. There's some considerations and factors that you need to consider when making that choice. There's a little bit of math that needs to be done. If you're not aware of any of this, please connect with a retirement specialist to make sure you are making the right choice. Now, the last pension plan we're going to be covering is going to be for the CNA Association. That's the California Nurses Association. So you'll notice that the formula is similar, but there is some differences here. They're still going to be using the highest average compensation. So looking at over the last 10 years of your career, which years were the highest 5. But now you'll notice that the credited service factor is lower. It's a 1.45%. Multiply that against your years of service will give you your monthly pension amount. Subtract out any pension offsets from that would give you the true number. Now, one thing that is also a little different, another subtle nuance is going to be the age penalties for the CNA pension plan. You'll notice that now it's going to be a straight 5% per year reduction, which you can think of that as more punitive, or you can think of it that Kaiser really likes their nurses more, in which they're giving them a bigger financial incentive to actually stay the full time. So those are just some of the nuances between some of the different plans at Kaiser. As I mentioned before, Kaiser is made up of many, many unions, different organizations that make up the entire company of Kaiser. So if there's a pension plan that we didn't cover today, or if you jump between different departments and we're part of multiple different organizations, you will have multiple different pension plans that are all associated during your time with each group. And within each group, you'll have a pension option choice that is individual to each one. And if any of you guys have gone on to my KPHR, you'll notice that there are many different payment options available, right about 7 to 8 different options, depending on the group that you belong to. For the majority, these options are going to be annuity options, which are lifetime income streams. And we're going to be going over each one so you guys get a firm understanding of how each one of them works. So first off, we have the single life annuity amount, which is going to be the most traditional form of pension payment. It covers the life of one individual, typically meant for those that are single, widowed, or divorced, in which you get a fixed amount at the start of your retirement commencement. That amount does not go up, does not go down. It will stay the same for the rest of your life. There is no cost of living adjustment. It's not adjusted with inflation. This is the amount that you'll receive on year 1 of your retirement and year 30 of your retirement. Then we have the joint 100% last survivor annuity with 15-year certain and life pop-up. I know that one's a mouthful, and we'll kind of break it down just by the title itself. So first off, we have the 100% joint and survivor annuity. So this one is going to cover the lifetime of 2 individuals, typically meant for those that are married, in which both of the annuitants, the joint annuitants, will receive the same amount that either of them were receiving while alive. And this one also has a 15-year certain guarantee on it, meaning that there is a 15-year guaranteed payment payout. Due to that, if something were to happen to both annuitants, that amount would continue on paying out to either beneficiaries of choice, heirs, or your estate until that time frame ends. And then we have the life pop-up. This part is if the joint annuitant, the non-KP spouse, were to pass away prior to the KP individual collecting the pension, their amount would actually pop up into the single life annuity value, which is going to be the highest payment out of all of your options, since it only covers the life of one individual. And then we have the joint and survivor annuity. This one, you have the choice to elect from either 50%, 66 2/3, or 75%. It's also one of the options. That's the default option for those that are married. It covers the life of 2 individuals, but this one works a little bit different. This one, depending on the option you chose, would determine what your surviving spouse would get. But one thing to note that makes this option a little different is that regardless of who passes away first, would mean that the surviving spouse's annuity, their pension would be reduced to the amount chosen. So let's say that you were collecting $2,000 a month and you chose the 50% joint and survivor annuity. Regardless of who passes away first, the amount would then be reduced to $1,000 a month going forward. In order to avoid this, you should be looking at the 100% joint and last survivor annuity. And then we have the fixed period and life annuity. This is where you can put a guaranteed time duration for your pension payout. You have the options to choose from 5, 10, 15, or 20 years. What that means is you are guaranteed a pension payment for the time that you chose. And if you were to pass away before that time frame ends, your beneficiaries, heirs, or state or even charity of choice would continue receiving those payments until that time frame ends. And if you live past that time frame, you would just continue receiving that same pension amount for the remainder of your life. Typically meant for somebody who is unhealthy, but if you're really unhealthy, you should be really looking at the lump sum choice, which lump sum choice is where you get an immediate payout of your pension upon your separation and commencement of your benefit. This amount could avoid taxes if you were to roll over into a traditional IRA account, which could be self-managed or managed by a financial advisor. Now, one thing to know about the lump sum option is how interest rates affect this specific amount, especially given the interest rate environment that we've been in the past year. It's definitely something to consider. And how interest rate affect it is that they have an inverse relationship with the lump sum value. So as interest rates go up, the lump sum amount goes down, and vice versa. You'll see the top of the screen with a little teeter-totter illustrate that. But one thing to keep in mind about Kaiser is that they use what is called a 2-month look back for the interest rate calculations that are used. So, meaning that if you're looking to retire, let's say in September, the interest rates that you'd be using would be July's interest rates, which, if you notice on the screen, have gone up. And as well, if you notice on the screen, you'll see 3 different segment rates. Each one of these segment rates pertain to a different period of time. Since these rates follow the composite corporate bond rates, you could also think of them as different durations. So the first segment would be the short-term bond rate, which would be years 0 through 5. Second segment would be the midterm bond rates, which would cover years 5 through 20. And then the third segment would be the long-term bond rate, which would cover years 20 and above. So depending on your age when you start collecting your benefit would determine on which of these segment rates would have the most weight to your calculation. Now, if you're not aware of how interest rate affect your lump sum, please reach out to the retirement group or reach out to a retirement specialist that can help you and guide you on what makes the most sense for your situation. Then we have the level income annuity. This is where you get a higher payment at the start of your pension commencement. And then once you start receiving Social Security, that amount will get reduced. This is to create a level income experience so there's no increases or decreases throughout your retirement. And then we have the fixed period and life with level income annuity. This is going to be a combination of 2 of the payment options we just went through. You could put a guaranteed time frame, whether that's 5, 10, 15, or 20 years, and as well as you would get a larger amount prior to the start of your Social Security. And then once you start collecting that amount, this amount would get reduced. This is going to be one of the lesser common options we've seen people take. But if we're talking about least common options, I believe the installment payments take it. This is going to be specifically for the TPMG group. So instead of getting something over your lifetime, you just get an X amount of payments. You can choose the time frame, but that is just X number of payments over that time frame. Now, there's not one option that is inherently better or worse than the other. It really depends on what situation, what their ultimate retirement goals and needs are, what their family situation is. There's a lot of factors and variables that go into consideration on which option is best suited for you. If you're not aware of any of this, please reach out to the retirement group. We'd be more than happy to sit down with you and walk you through your options and create a financial comprehensive plan that will pinpoint which option is best suited for you. As I mentioned, we do provide that complimentary cash flow analysis. Even if you have a financial advisor already, get a second opinion. And if you have a financial advisor already, ask them, do you know and understand my pension? Can you explain it to me? how would I be able to optimize my pension? Please reach out to the retirement group. Either myself or somebody from my team would be more than happy to go over your current situation and go over your benefits and explain what options you have available. As you see here, 74% of Americans over the age of 50 do not have a written plan. We just think that is unbelievable and honestly shouldn't even be allowed. Please connect with a retirement specialist, go over your options, and make sure you are best suited to have a successful retirement. And if you would like to schedule some time with myself or anyone from my team, please reach out to us, give us a call, send us an email, scan these QR codes here, and set up some time that best fits your calendar. And again, I want to go over that we are not a part of Kaiser Permanente. We're not endorsed, affiliated, or sponsored by KP. We are an independent financial advising group that has been working with KP individuals for many, many years now, which puts us in this unique position to be able to provide specific tailored advice that surrounds their benefits. Now, I think it's time to bring Sam back on to see if we received any questions throughout the presentation.
Hey, Carlos. Yes, we got quite a few questions. We'll try to answer as many as possible. In the event that we don't get to your question, please remember that there is a link in the chat. You can always book an appointment with a KP-focused advisor after this webinar to get any of your questions answered. Carlos, are you ready for the first one?
Yes, I am, Sam.
Okay. Number one, do I have to take my pension right after retirement? If I wait to commence my pension, will I then be forced to use next year's interest rates?
So that's a two-part question. But to answer the first part of that question will be no. Pension can be left at Kaiser. Let's say you do an early retirement and decide to go work elsewhere after your time at KP. You can leave the pension alone and in some cases defer out of those pension offsets and take it at a later point of time. Now, one thing to keep in mind about this strategy is how interest rates may impact your pension options down the road. As I mentioned before, KP uses the 2-month look back for the interest rates on the lump sum calculation. So, meaning if you're looking to retire down the road and if interest rates have gone up, that will have a direct impact to that option. The pension lump sum interest rates are used based off of the benefit commencement date, not your retirement date. So that's just something to keep in mind.
All righty, thank you. Number two, what's the probability of KP canceling the lump sum option and only providing the annuity only option?
Well, no one has a crystal ball. We can't tell the future, but defined benefit plans are becoming less and less common, with more and more companies transitioning out of those type of plans into more of a defined contribution plan, such as 401ks. It's definitely a possibility for that to happen down the road, which is why it's so important to make sure you have a plan in place that will help you adapt to those unexpected events.
Thank you. Let's see. Number three, if rates continue to rise, will it affect my pension annuity? How about my lump sum?
Well, the segment rates that are used in the pension calculation are specifically for the lump sum option. The annuity option is not directly impacted by the movement of these segment rates. They're affected in other different ways, such as your purchasing power, such as the possibility of being locked in a fixed rate environment when interest rates are moving up.
Alrighty, I think we have time for two more. With interest rates so high on the lump sum, does it make sense to just take an annuity from KP?
Well, we can't generalize that one option is better than the other. It really depends on one situation. Each payment option is geared for specific situations. There's a lot of factors and variables that you need to consider when making that choice. If you're not aware of this, please reach out to not only the retirement group, but a retirement specialist out there that focuses with working with KP individuals to make sure you're making the right choice, not only for yourself, but your family's situation, as they are a huge part of this retirement planning process.
Alrighty, Carlos, let's do one more before we end today. Can I change my mind after choosing between a lump sum pension payout and an annuity payout?
Unfortunately, no. Once you choose your pension option and collect your first payments, that option is locked in for life. So there's a lot riding on that decision, not only your financial wellness, but as well as your family's financial wellness. So please reach out to the retirement group, book a complimentary session to make sure you're making the right choices for your family's retirement situation.
All right, Carlos, any closing remarks before we end today?
No, other than that, we appreciate you guys tuning in. I look forward to connecting with each and every one of you on the call here to make sure you're on the right track to have a successful retirement. We appreciate you, Sam, for being our host here today, and everybody listening in. We hope to see you guys in our next session.